The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. The earth is our mother, we must take care of her. Hey yana ho yana, hey yan yan. Hey yana ho yana, hey yan yan.
Good morning, and welcome to our second Sunday service, The Web of Life, Interdependence and Connectedness. We begin our service this morning by lighting a candle as I share these words. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. Chief Seattle, 1854. Hi, I'm Lois Brown, and our reading today is an excerpt from the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This reading is a little longer than our usual one, but so beautifully sets the stage for our theme today. So sit back and enjoy the words and the imagery that it brings. Sky Woman Falling. In winter, when the green earth lies resting beneath a blanket of snow, this is the time for storytelling. The storytellers begin by calling upon those who came before, who passed the stories down to us, for we are all messengers. In the beginning there is the sky world. She fell like a maple seed, pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from a hole in the sky world, making her path where only darkness had been. It took her a long time to fall. In fear, or maybe hope, she clutched a bundle tightly in her hand. Hurtling downward, she saw only dark water below. But in that emptiness there were many eyes gazing up at the sudden shaft of light. They saw there the small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. And as it grew closer, they could see it was a woman, arms outstretched, long black hair billowing behind as she spiraled toward them. The geese nodded at one another and rose together from the water in a wave of goose music. She felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath to break her fall. Far from home she'd ever known, she caught her breath at the warmth embrace of soft feathers as they gently carried her downward. And so it began. The geese could not hold the woman above the water for much longer, so they called a council to decide what to do. Resting on their wings, she saw them all gather, loons, otters, swans, beavers, fish of all kinds. A giant turtle floated in their midst and offered his back for her to rest upon. Gratefully she stepped from the goose wings onto the dome of his shell. The others understood that she needed land for her home and discussed how they might serve her need. The deep divers among them had heard of mud at the bottom of the water and agreed to go find some. The loon dove first, but the distance was too far, and after a long while he surfaced with nothing to show for his efforts. One by one, the other animals offered to help: otter, beaver, sturgeon, but the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great for even the strongest swimmers. They returned gasping for air with their heads ringing, and some did not return at all. Soon only little Muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. He volunteered to go while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward, and he was gone a very long time. They waited and waited for him to return, fearing the worst for their relative. And, before long, a stream of bubbles rose with the small, limp body of Muskrat. He had given his life to aid this helpless human, but the others noticed that his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened it, there was a small handful of mud. Turtle said, "Here, put it on my back and I will hold it." Sky Woman bent and spread the mud with her hands across the shell of Turtle. Moved by the extraordinary gifts of the animals, she sang in thanksgiving and then began to dance, her feet caressing the earth. The land grew and grew as she danced her thanks, from a dab of mud on Turtle's back until the whole earth was made. Not by Sky Woman alone, but from the alchemy of all the animal's gifts, coupled with her deep gratitude. Together, they formed what we know today as Turtle Island, our home. Like any good guest, Sky Woman had not come empty-handed. The bundle was still clutched in her hand when she toppled from the hole in the sky world. She had reached out to grab onto the tree of life that grew there. In her grasp were branches, fruits, and seeds of all kinds of plants. She scattered these onto the new ground, and sunlight streamed through the hole from Skyworld, allowing the seeds to flourish. Wild grasses, flowers, trees, and medicines spread everywhere. And now that the animals too had plenty to eat, many came to live with her on Turtle Island. And that story is an example of the web of life, of interdependence and connectedness on Turtle Island, also known as Earth.
I just was thanking Lois for taking those beautiful words and delivering them in such a an entanglement of emotions. I just really appreciate how you shared that with us. Thank you so much. I am excited now to introduce you to yet another truly inspiring, brilliant, passionate, and terrific friend of mine, Daryl Hawks. When he and I met, we both worked for Kirkland Home, and he was in charge of visual merchandising, and I was in charge of training. And I can say that Daryl, it was a natural in the business world, and I think it came down to his ability to work with people and get the most out of them. Though his well-earned success was both rapid and steady, he just recognized that it filled little other than his checking account. So it would be easy to settle, but Daryl's never been a settler. He wasn't happy, or maybe I should say satisfied with where it was. So he knew there was something more he wanted to do with his life. So he pivoted. Daryl grew up in Mount Airy, North Carolina. And for those of you who were ever fans of the Andy Griffith Show, Mount Airy is literally the inspirational town for Mayberry. And this is undoubtedly where Daryl grew to love the outdoors, be it in creeks, in tents, on trails, or on tennis courts. Now let's get back to that pivot of his. Daryl tried to extricate himself from Kirkland's, but as so often happens with brilliant members of the team, they just weren't having it. So he eased out. He reduced his hours a little bit. He eventually moved to a consultant role. And meanwhile, in all that extra time, he began to further his education at Belmont University, which is a wonderful school in Nashville. And he earned both his bachelor's and his master's degree in business with a focus on nonprofit. Daryl has worked hands-on as a leader for both profit and nonprofit companies, developing and operating business strategies, social enterprises, and now really kind of the focus of part of today's service, he's a park director. His resume also includes, by the way, being certified as a naturalist, which I didn't even know you could do, board director for both the Tennessee Naturalist Program and Crossings Nashville Action Partnership. He's still a business consultant, I believe, for Kirkland's. He may tell you differently, for a couple of other businesses, and for a company called, or a nonprofit called Project Return, which is a highly successful program that he really sort of got in on the grassroots with. And it helps when I say helps, in very real, very solid, very specific, very productive ways, people who have criminal backgrounds enter back into society in a productive way. And there's much to be said about that, but it's goes more. And the reason for me telling it to you today, it goes more to state something about his character and his vision than really about his subject today. But because that wasn't enough, all of those jobs, he's also added adjunct instructor at Vanderbilt University, which is known as the Harvard of the South, unless Harvard is known as the Vanderbilt of the North. I can't remember which way it goes. Without further ado, please meet my dear friend, Daryl Hawks.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Susan, for those all too kind words. And it's been a pleasure of my life knowing you and being friends and colleagues with you. So thank you for that and for your place in my life. I'm glad to be here. We're celebrating Earth Day and Earth Month during all of April and really beyond. And one way we celebrate is by making stories and retelling stories. Stories bring us together on this very occasion, for instance, and our traditions of faith and belief are cemented and then passed down by stories. I have the pleasure of being with you all today because one of my, as you have already heard, incredible storyteller friends is Miss Susan, and invited me to join you on this occasion. So thank you. We all arrive at this gathering with our own stories, those stories that are lived and shared and witnessed. And then we honor each other by hearing and listening and retelling each other's stories. And so this month, as we celebrate Earth, I'm reminded of our connection to Mother Earth and each other in her presence. And I'm humbled by and inspired by and honored to be a part of and share some stories that illustrate the power of the outdoors to bring us together and our individual and collective connection to Earth, to nature, and the great outdoors. Next slide, Carlos. Thank you. And so here you see the backdrop to my reality today here at Mill Ridge Park. Next slide, Carlos. First, let me say I came to be an earth lover, as Susan has somewhat mentioned, in the backwoods of North Carolina at a very young age. And I didn't consider myself an outdoors person back then because I figured us all to be outdoors people. I figured that the outdoors attracted and welcomed and uplifted all of us equally. And then I grew up and my naivete went the way of spring flowers in June. And nowadays I'm coming to know and trying to understand how it is that Earth Day is not yet a celebration for all of us. Perhaps for some of us, the notion of celebrating Earth, celebrating the outdoors and nature is as odd as a Mayflower in winter. It wasn't too long ago that many organizations like Friends of Mill Ridge Park were issuing public pronouncements that our outdoor spaces were welcome to all races. We were essentially having to officially express in this modern era, as if it had been an unknown notion that our earth is your earth too. But accepting that and realizing that and living that out as a truth continues to be difficult, if not impossible, for some of us. Next slide, Carlos. And so back in 2012, as Susan has alluded to, I found a new meaningful purpose working early days and late days with people returning to our community from prison, beginning their lives anew. And for many of them, the outdoors are destitute places. They're dangerous and they're scary and they're hard but necessary to survive in. And for some, the outdoors are even forbidden. And during those days, I spent my work days craving the outdoors. And I spent my time off in the outdoors, on trails and in rivers and around campfires. And I noticed the scarcity of the demographics of the people from my work. The trails were a place of homogeny and privilege. The trails were white. I didn't see my people from work on the trails and in the outdoors, able to escape their stresses and desperation for a moment of quiet nature therapy. I wondered if they too, or if they were forever to forego their share of the amazing benefits for the mind and body and soul that Mother Earth has in store for all of us. Next slide, Carlos. Then in 2018, I had the chance to take on different work here at Mill Ridge Park. Mill Ridge Park is 600 acres of grasslands and farmlands and woodlands in the middle of a fast-growing, diverse community, one of the most diverse in Tennessee. Also surrounding this precious parkland are fast-growing industrial and commercial complexes. Our community here and surrounding Mill Ridge Park was identified as historically underserved by our city, and it was designated park poor, lacking sufficient access to green space and outdoor services. And not surprising, our community disproportionately suffers the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, with 1 in 5 of us being uninsured. However, today at Mill Ridge Park, we're in our 5th year of offering healthy outdoor experiences for our community to improve our mind, our body, and our soul together. Here at the park, the outdoors provide a purpose for our community and a special, rare place for recreation, education, socialization and unity, nutrition, service, and conservation. And those regular outdoor experiences include, next slide, Carlos, gardening and orcharding. Next slide. Hiking. Next slide. Yoga and meditation. Next slide. Birding for all ages. Next slide. Outside movie nights. Next slide. Plein air painting and creativity. Next slide. Flying kites, which we did on a very windy day yesterday. Next slide. Dancing and dance lessons. Next slide. Stargazing. Next slide. And of course, fireside stories. In this work, we take part in learning about Earth, about ourselves, and about each other together. We get to co-create special memories with our community here at the park, the makings of a positive outdoor story. And sometimes it's the first positive experience for our neighbor. Perhaps it's their introduction to Mother Earth. I'd like to share with you about a few of those introductions. Next slide. So early on, as we began to do outreach here in the community about the park, we knew that we must quickly get kids onto the land for our regular scavenger hunts and land mapping. So this time we brought middle school classes out, and with many of those students who could not recall their last, perhaps even their first visit to a park. And when they were invited to share about their upcoming visit to Mill Ridge Park beforehand, some expressed reluctance, some shared their fear and described the outdoors as dangerous. And when they arrived here at the park, they asked how much land I owned here. And they described me as a very nice man for letting them visit my land. So I introduced these youngsters to their park and their land, their wild nature to explore. And we quickly got busy discovering cedar glades and creeks. And we eventually arrived at the treasure at the end of the scavenger hunt, which was an ice cooler full of popsicles tucked under an old maple tree that has since been named Popsicle Tree. When those students returned to their class the following day, their journal entries about their park visit highlighted their discoveries and their good time with classmates and those popsicles. But best of all, they referenced their next visit to their park. Next slide. Next is Murphy, who stopped by the park last summer after driving by to see us spread out in the lawn playing games. She insists on her daughter and niece, who she regularly keeps, to play hard until the last minute of their visit, and sometimes she plays too. One day as they were packing up for home, she shared with me that she'd been so concerned about her kids not having a backyard like she did growing up, about them not getting to enjoy the wide open outdoors. And now she shared, with Mill Ridge Park nearby and so welcoming, she and her kids have their very own 600-acre backyard. Next slide. When a member in our community, Leah, did her master's degree dissertation on engaging new Americans in the park planning process, we learned that our community most desired in their new park a place to grow and share food, sometimes food that can't be found or afforded at our nearby markets and grocers. So approximately 20 acres here are dedicated to just that. This spring, the more than 3 acres of community gardens so far at Mill Ridge Park are busy with more than 80 gardeners learning about, growing, and sharing fresh, sometimes mysterious foods. Take a trip around the garden here and you may be chased by overzealous bees. You'll hear Spanish and Arabic and Burmese and Nepali languages, and you'll see unidentifiable produce. And more than anything, you'll see people coming together to break and share bread with Mother Earth as part of a global family. Next slide. Next is Samir. I met Samir on an alternative spring break just this past month. He was the quietest of the bunch, at first, responding with a few words and unable to hold eye contact. By the way, he's the farthest on the right. Yet after a day exploring and getting lost in the woods together, on the trails where we were building trails together, he became a storyteller himself. He shared that he was born in the US after his family settled here as refugees. He shared with me their Bosnian traditions, including all their secret recipes. He's familiar and so proud of his Bosnian heritage. You'd think he was born there, and tells of the place from his own long-lived experience. When I asked how he came to know the culture so well with his youth and with such distance, he told me about how his community of Bosnian refugees come together regularly in the outdoors at the park nearby to share and express and celebrate their treasured memories of Bosnia. It's as if Mother Earth gives his community a place and a time to keep alive in them what is dear, and a way to keep near to them what is physically distant. Next slide, please. Nowadays, in my work here at the park, I still get to celebrate new beginnings with those men and women leaving prison behind. They come to the park regularly to do their hired work in janitorial and lawn care services. And for those for whom it's their first visit here, there's usually a long pause and a long look around, maybe even a few breaths before they ask a few questions. And then I let them in on a long-kept secret that this is their park, that they are welcome here. And I invite them to return again and again for hikes and kites and all the rest. These experiences, these triumphs, these stories, and so many more stories and experiences are co-authored by the one we honor and the one we celebrate during April, our dear Mother Earth. Next slide. If you're interested in our work here at Mill Ridge Park, you can be in touch with me and with my team by visiting friends of millridgepark.org, and we're live and active on social pages as well. I'm happy to hear from you and answer any questions you have today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daryl. I loved that. As Daryl mentioned, we'd love to have some questions answered. And if you want, just raise your hand or Dagmar, go ahead and unmute yourself.
How did the park acquire the land? Is it given from a governmental entity or on loan? Would you explain that part, please?
Sure, I appreciate that question. We began with a 180-acre donation of land by a local foundation who purchased the farm from a local family, and that land donation was made to the city parks department. And then the city parks department, recognizing the opportunity in this community to expand green space, went on to purchase an additional 400 plus acres to amass the 622 acres in total that make up the park. And so it was a collaboration between private philanthropy as well as our city parks department.
Hey, Daryl, would you mind expanding a little bit on the lady whose house is right there on the land?
Yes. So Miss Mary, who Susan's referring to, was born and grew up on the farmland that was that initial acquisition. And she had held out on all of the developers knocking at her door. She'd held out on selling her farm to developers for commercial and industrial purposes. And so when she got a call from a local foundation who was prioritizing the health and wellness of our community, she listened to their proposal and ultimately agreed to sell her farm. But she insisted that it be purchased by the foundation with a conservation easement that requires that in perpetuity it be a place in service of the community and be preserved for its natural characteristics. And so Miss Mary and I had several occasions to spend together here on the park land. She was here for the unveiling or the opening of our community garden. And on occasion, she would visit the farmhouse that she grew up in with me for a meal. And to instruct me about maintaining her flower beds. She sadly passed away this past year at the age of 98, but remained for the duration of her life on Earth, just some 2.5 miles away from the parkland that she had known as home all her life. And so we remember her, especially this season as the tulips will start to bloom soon and the beautiful iris the countless iris that she loves so dearly start to bloom. So yeah, thanks for asking about her.
Well, I know she touched you all quite a bit, not only with her generosity, but with her stories and her commitment to the earth. Does anybody else have a question for Daryl before we move on? Yes, ma'am, Mary.
Yeah, so a biggest fear of mine is to throw a party and nobody comes. And so Daryl, oh my gosh, the variety of parties that you, so to speak, are having. And, I'm overwhelmed, by the middle school and then the former prison people and, all the activities that you're doing. So I know it's a lot of hard work and thought that went into it, but how did you make it happen? Our small group is working, around, social action and justice issues, and we're getting there slowly but surely. But what's the magic that you have that makes that happen?
I appreciate that, Mary. It's a recipe involving a few key ingredients. The first is Susan alluded to earlier on. I see myself, maybe before even being an outdoors person, I see myself as a people person. And so certainly the work that we have done and are doing is done by a village of passionate, smarter people than I. And so we are just all about making this work. And so it's a very kind of grassroots on the ground effort day to day, including right now, I have folks who are outside my office on the parkland hosting a dog's day with folks to, bring their dogs together. So there's a village of us. But I also will say that what we have come to terms with is that we do, against our best efforts and our passions, host a party that no one shows up for. And what we have come to understand is that even then, certainly we are serving this community, and our community benefits by just knowing that there is a party with their best interest in mind going on in their community. And so, for example, we hosted a book club. We do host a book club on the regular, and there were a couple occasions where folks didn't show up for the book club. And I said, it is actually just as well that we still host this book club, because I may not show up for this book club, but when I know that there is a book club happening in my neighborhood, my quality of life is improved. My mental wellness, my sense of belonging is improved. And so, Mary, fear not about hosting the party and no one showing up, because sometimes just the idea that a party is going on in your community, in your neighborhood, that is about serving you, that is enough. So yeah.
Thank you.
I can go on. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Joyce Francis had her hand up for me. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. I enjoyed that. I'm on the other side of the country on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, and I'm interested in the structure of the legal structure of your setup. Who is the holder of the conservation easement? Is that the city?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's quite complicated. So thanks for inquiring. The city holds the deed. The City Parks and Recreation Department holds the deed to the land, as well as the conservation easement to that parcel of land, because not the entirety of the park is covered by the conservation easement. So that's complicated. And then my organization is an independent community-based nonprofit operating in an official partnership with the City and Parks Department. And so we operate on the land. We have a purpose of, benefiting the community. We have a nonprofit mission. And so we operate independent of government and the city, but in partnership with them here.
So you're the entity that guarantees this conservation easement for the city, I guess. Huh?
We actually have a third entity who guarantees that, and it's a land trust. And
okay.
So we work closely with them. For instance, we're doing master planning these days on the farm, which is covered by that easement. And we are in regular conversations with them about our intentions and our plans in order that they not conflict with that easement.
Got it. Thank you for that. We have a land trust here that's also doing that same thing, but the activity level that you've generated on that land is very impressive.
Thank you.
Daryl, if I could just ask you to share one more story, just because I think it sort of takes Mary's point earlier about throwing the party that no one shows up to. That's my fear as well. But I think it's also about stepping into sort of, you just don't know, but you're going to figure it out. Can you tell the story? It's a fairly brief one, but tell the story about when you needed to establish some trailheads in the park.
Well, that actually is quite a long story, but I'll give you. It's longer than the trails are. So we had raised money to build a trailhead here at one corner of the parkland that would grant access, more proximate access to the park for many residents and workers of the area. Before work and after work and over their lunch break and such. And so once we'd raised the money, we went to the Parks Department and their board for approval of that development. And one of the members had concern that the cost for the trailhead was too high, perhaps relative to other budgetary items. I'm not certain, but ultimately we decided that it wasn't so much a concern about but first of all, we had raised the money, right? So we basically, our argument, if you will, was that there was the need and we had overcome the budgetary issue by raising the funds. And so we were proceeding regardless, right? Because of the recognized need and the impact that it would have to our community. But we couldn't help but take, personally, the suggestion that we should reconsider, given that it was, more costly than maybe we would imagine it should be. And we couldn't help but think that had something to do with the belief that our community didn't deserve a trailhead so expensive. And so for that reason, we were, willing to double down and even double the price for the trailhead, because we knew that our community not only needed it, but our community deserved a nice trailhead, for instance. So that's frankly, that's at the crux of my work in many matters, that side, or that two-sided perspective about our work and the value of it and the importance of it.
Yeah. I'll just add on one point. How many people were directly involved in that, Daryl?
In the trailhead?
In the trailhead?
Oh, dozens.
Dozens.
Yeah.
And out of those dozens, not one knew how to build a trailhead.
Right.
But they figured it out. So I love the fact that you just took that step into, you had no idea, but you knew somebody knew, and together you figured it out.
That's right. And we're still figuring it out. And that's, we intentionally decided that one of the values of our organization would not be excellence or perfection. And that could seem like questionable at first, but what we wanted to acknowledge was that sometimes the notion of perfection and excellence will delay progress, will get in the way of good. And we wanted to allow good to be our starting place, and frankly, sometimes our ending place, as it may be. And so, yeah. So with the trailhead, we knew that we wouldn't have in-house the ability to build it perfectly, but we would find that ability as we proceeded, and we have been able to.
Very good. Daryl, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for your questions. We have used up a lot of our time, which I sort of lost track of listening to the professionals here on today's show. So far, we've heard a creation story of sorts through Sky Woman, which was so brilliantly shared with us through Lois, and from Daryl about nature and how experiencing it fully can be life-changing. And we are all part of this web of life. We're a family. And now we're going to look at a video that was created around the human family as conceived by Maya Angelou.
Human family. I note the obvious differences in the human family. Some of us are serious. Some thrive on comedy. Some declare their lives are lived as true profundity, and others claim they really live the real reality. The variety of our skin tones can confuse bemused delight, brown and pink and beige and purple, tan and blue and white. I've sailed upon the 7 seas and stopped in every land. I've seen the wonders of the world, not yet one common man. I know 10,000 women called Jane and Mary Jane. I've not seen any two who really were the same. Mirror twins are different, although their features jibe, and lovers think quite different thoughts while lying side by side. We love and lose in China, we weep on England's moors, and laugh and moan in Guinea, and thrive on Spanish shores. We seek success in Finland, are born and die in Maine. In minor ways we differ, in major we're the same. I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike.
So beautiful. I think that Maya Angelou might be the only person that reads Maya Angelou better than Richard Love. Richard, that's a pretty high bar. This fellowship and beyond, are our human family. We are part of something grand, and we are part of the web, and so moved to experience the interdependence and connectedness that it presents. Now let's take a look at that blue boat home.
I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun my sail and moon my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Wow, I love that song. So, Daryl, I've known Susan for 25 years. Where in the heck has she been hiding you? Thank you, thank you, thank you for, we're honored to have you and learn about your beautiful acreage and land and all that you're doing. So thank you. Thank you, Susan, for facilitating, Lois, for reading such beautiful words, and for all of you who joined us this morning as we have, I think it's our first service as our newly named Open Hearts and Minds Fellowship. And if ever there was a true statement, it's that. We are open minds and hearts. In just a few minutes, we will have Joys and Concerns. Our lovely Joan Denson will facilitate that. And then after that, we will have just open community chat time for those of you who want to stick around. So if you can stay for Joys and Concerns or have other things you want to ask of Daryl, great. If you have to leave us, we'll hope to see you next time on May 8th. It's our Mother's Day tribute. All right. So Joan, I'm going to have you take it away. Oh, wait. For those of you who have to leave, we do our love ritual. So if you have to go, we're sending you love. And if you're staying, we give you all kinds of signs of love. Mwah.